Sauce and Miller Lite, Dave's Town Club in Delano tonight from 5 to 7. Stop by for drink specials, games, and register for a chance to win a spot in the Vikings Foundation Golf Tournament. Get the full details now at KFAN.com, keyword golf.
Number 2 of the program, I mentioned Russo will join. Our first visit with Russo since, last time we had him on was before he left for Italy, correct?
Yes, we did not have him on from Italy.
From Italy at all. So we'll give him some grief for that, and then we'll chat with him, and then we'll let bygones be bygones at some point. So he's going to be at 5. Inbox, email Guardsy, jg@kfan.com, Dr. Dan's inbox. If that tickles your fancy, you can certainly be try to be a part of that sort of conversation. Where was I going to go? We did the seal of approval. Oh, so yesterday we did start the show we try hard on this show to continue to shock jock our way to getting Aaron Rodgers in Minnesota. We don't know if it's headed anywhere. We have no idea whether the Vikings have any interest in doing it. But we were playing off of some reporting by the highly respected Adam Schefter that he does believe Rodgers. He did all the asterisks, right? All the disclaimers. A-Rod is capable of, doing a 180 at any minute, so he could announce tomorrow that he's going to retire. But that the Schefter reporting indicates a belief that he's going to play another year, is likely to play another year. But he also threw out that the assumption that it's got to be Pittsburgh, he didn't necessarily buy. He said that would you'd seem to think, the likely return for him. But then he reminded folks of what we reported a lot on this show a year ago, that a lot of people didn't want to believe. A lot of the McBobos didn't want to believe it, but it was true. The Vikings had interest in Rodgers, and more importantly, Rodgers had even more interest in the purple. We all know, ultimately, no deal was done, no deal was struck. But he reminded people that and said, look, the Vikings might be in a different situation this year. It's very clear, at the very least, they are less concerned about hurting J.J. McCarthy's feelings. So does that potentially open the door? Maybe not. Maybe they look at the cold, hard reality of where Rodgers is and says, maybe 3 years ago, yeah, but now it's a pipe dream. It's not worth even investing in. Who knows where it goes, but we were trying to keep hope alive, keep the dream alive in this case, that perhaps something would happen. Even suggesting that the old Carole King song, It's Too Late, might not apply here, that it might not be too late to get A-Rod here. Well, Guardsy gets a hold of audio, I believe from this morning, involving another quarterback whisperer named Dan Orlovsky. Front and center, very high profile when it comes to NFL analysis and quarterback analysis at the 4-letter network, right? ESPN.
Yes.
And I guess that must have been the subject at hand. What should the Vikings do, given they've certainly opened the door to adding a veteran quarterback to either compete for the job or to actually just get the job? So you're going to hear on this panel, it's Greeny.
Yep.
It's Orlovsky, and who is the third individual?
Harry Douglas.
Oh, Terry Douglas.
Harry Douglas, former NFL player,
Harry
who's
Douglas,
on a lot.
He gets in a couple of comments, but it's mainly Orlovsky. Let's listen to what Orlovsky had to say this morning.
To J.J.
You
McCarthy,
shouldn't bring in a challenger.
But my point is, you bring in Aaron Rodgers, you're basically moving on from J.J. McCarthy.
That's where Minnesota has to have the mindset. Last year, I was anti that. Last year, I was the person to say, nope, no Aaron Rodgers to Minnesota because J.J. McCarthy, it would stunt his growth, it would stunt his development. Again, I'm a supporter of J.J. If you're Minnesota, you have to be thinking of who is the best quarterback for us available right now and go get him. Kevin O'Connell is a great coach. The NFL doesn't care about what you did 2 years ago. If you have another bad year, you're going to be on that hot seat all of a sudden, and then you're in that same situation. So as much as I worry about the stunting of the growth, nope. If Aaron Rodgers wants to go to Minnesota, and if I'm Minnesota, go get Aaron Rodgers.
What do you think?
Well, number one, my mindset is this team is in win now mode.
Right.
They don't have time to be waiting on J.J. McCarthy. But if you have a Justin Jefferson, who I still feel like is the best receiver in the game, you have a solid number 2 in Jordan Addison, T.J. Hawkinson. Well, you need a piece to the puzzle that gets those guys the football.
Is Aaron Rodgers that piece?
Yes, he is. Or you can be Kirk Cousins. Either one of the two.
The totem pole should be Aaron Rodgers, Kirk Cousins, Kyler Murray. That should be the
I agree with that
the order for the Minnesota Vikings. Aaron Rodgers, still capable of playing good football. Kirk Cousins, I thought, played good football when he started last year. And then Kyler Murray is still so talented that if you don't get one of those two, he's the guy.
Interesting on the totem pole thing.
Yeah, I thought so.
With, right? He clearly, well, it seems he clearly has A-Raj over Cousins in that sense. And I guess he's not including, maybe he would have Derek Carr 4 or 5. I don't know where Derek Carr would fit in. There's nothing official yet on Derek Carr, although I think he has said, pretty much said, yeah, I would like to come back if the situation were correct. So I just throw that into the mix. You know, we're just, our job is to follow the story. And I did think it was interesting that Orlovsky went down that road. That would seem to indicate Orlovsky's belief is there's still enough good in his game. I think the tricky part is trying to evaluate offensive talent here and what impact it might have on getting more out of Rodgers than the Steelers did last year, because I do think there's more talent here. Now, on the other hand, you could say, Dan, what about the offensive line? Is that talented? Well, the answer is probably not. Other than the tackles, right? There's still questions that, well, we probably going to need another center, right? And there's even question of at least one guard position. So that has to be, I guess, part of it when we talk about talent. And can you fix the offensive line enough, given that Rodgers cannot move the way he used to? He cannot. He is a candidate to get sacked 5 times in every game because his mobility.
We saw it when we played him.
Is limited compared to what it once was. But Orlovsky is just a guy I respect. That he's not the last word, but I thought it was interesting that he seemed to be going down that road as well. Whether the Vikings will or not, probably still a long shot, but I've learned before, all bets, I think this year more than last year, all bets are off. And because they're coming at it clearly from a different perspective than they did a year ago. I think they were haughty a year ago.
I agree with you.
I think they had that arrogance. Oh, we know what we're doing. I'm
the whisperer.
Yes, we can plug him in, and you're going to be surprised how well he does, even in the first or second month of it. Yeah, he'll have some hiccups and some ups and downs, but we'll be fine because we got this great infrastructure around him. So I think they're in I think they've been humbled. And that, I think, opens the door to anything, including the possibility that you could make a mistake doing it, right? It could end up, biting you in the butt. It really can. There's no guarantee if you decide to go down that road. Other than if you decide to go down that road, I don't know if it's over for McCarthy, but
and Orlovsky said it was not necessarily.
Did he say that?
I don't know if that was in that clip, but
okay.
Because I watched most of that today. He did say, doesn't mean that I'm giving up on him. I still think he's got some talent, and I still think it. And honestly, you look at the guy that just preceded him, Sam Darnold, and others as exhibits for Geno Smith. Like, we give up on these guys now at our own peril.
Yes.
So he brought that up. But it is interesting that everybody agrees the mood has definitely shifted. Even KOC saying our timetable's different now. That's saying what Harry Douglas said. We're trying to win. We're trying to win big time now. We're not in the development mode right now. Well, we thought we could do both, and we couldn't.
That's true. The question is whether they're still kidding themselves that they're capable of doing it. That's where it could end up really imploding. Where you go, we're just not that good, and now where are you? But we'll see. I mean, they're clear. And I think, again, part of where they're stuck is these owners don't want to hear that.
Right.
And in the end, they're going to, they're going to basically name the tune, right? And everybody else has to dance to it. That's the way it works. For better or for worse. It's not always the best.
And like you said, it could implode, and that's the situation you put yourself in when you make the bet on a young quarterback and it doesn't work out. That's why everybody's always trying to find their franchise guy, because when you don't have one and you're not either kidding yourself or developing one along the way, it gets scary real quick because there's not a lot of people looking to get rid of franchise quarterbacks, except, I guess, the Vikings a year ago when they let Sam Darnold walk and he won a Super Bowl the next year. Those guys just don't come available very often.
All right, we're late. We'll get a shorty. Well, actually, we can go to 42 because we're wide open this hour, right? Till Russo?
We are, yep.
Till 5 o'clock. Maybe when we come back, we'll discuss a little bit about what stood out for you with during our conversation with Bill Guerin. While back in action tonight on the Fan against the Lanch, right? A great opportunity to, declare once again new sheriff in town. Who's to say? Hit the ground running here, right? For the so-called second half of the season. I've got a couple of A-section items I want to discuss as well. And as I mentioned, we'll prepare for Russo and the inbox. Still time to email Guardsy, jg@kfan.com with your Dr. Dan letters. Yeah. Get into a fairly serious subject here that I'd been meaning to discuss in a little more detail the last several days. And we really didn't get to it much with our two reporters who cover the Vikings in much detail, at least. Kevin Seifert, who I think joined on Tuesday, and then it was Alec Lewis yesterday, both from the Combine. The story breaks over the weekend that Vikings receiver, he had at least been receiver for the Vikings last year, Rondale Moore, had died at the age of 25 years old. And according to local authorities in the Louisville, Kentucky area, the belief is that he died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, correct? Moore, I can still remember when we first found out that the Vikings had signed him. And I think what we said was, low risk, high reward, right? He'd been injured a lot, but he's always had this intriguing talent, right? A guy who could make people at college, was a dominant college player, right? When healthy, could make people miss, return guy, multi-purpose kind of a guy, not very big, right? But a guy you go, as a specialty player, he could help if he can stay healthy. And what happened? He gets hurt the first time he returns a kickoff in a preseason game. This was it in Minneapolis, wasn't it? It was here.
Yeah. The
People's Stadium.
Yep.
And there was just a lot of discussion at the time that you could hear his frustration.
It was a really tough scene.
It was a terrible scene. And the question at the time also was whether it was an illegal tackle. I think technically it wasn't.
Yeah.
But that was the conversation. But it was a bad ACL, and he was out for the season at that point. So he's in rehab mode, has been in rehab mode. And I mentioned to you, I think might have been Monday's show, that by sheer coincidence, part of his rehab was taking place at the same place that our guy Rick Bozich was rehabbing after he suffered that multiple fracture of his ankle. Basically, he was mowing the lawn, and I think he basically hit a hole. His foot went down, and then it even got worse when he tried to get up. They ended up at the same spot in terms of rehab. And so Rick, who knew him some, got to know him better and had good conversations about the difficulties of rehab and about many, many different things. So it humanized it for Rick because he'd had all these conversations with him. And in fact, I saw a quote from his trainer, one of his trainers. I think it was a story, might have been on one of the TV websites in Kentucky, in Louisville. And the quote from the trainer was, he was getting very close to being able to run routes, that he made it sound like he was doing pretty well. Well, maybe he wasn't doing very well mentally. We don't know. We also get the news about Martin Short's daughter.
Yeah.
Catherine Short, 42 years old, who, according to authorities, also died due to a self-inflicted gunshot wound. In fact, I also think he has canceled an appearance here with Steve Martin for all the obvious reasons, or postponed at the very least. And then I got in one of the listeners Sunday who was, I think, listening to some of this discussion, because we did talk a lot of hockey Sunday, but we got into the Moore story a little bit too. I got this note via my my iHeart address. Good morning, Dan. Yesterday's horrible news, I guess he actually sent it. Yeah, he did send it Sunday. Yesterday's horrible news about Rondale Moore came on the 28th anniversary of my best friend Tim's suicide. Every year when Feb 22 rolls around, and Feb 22 just did, I'm reminded as if it were yesterday. Tim and I became best friends in high school. At the time, he had diabetes and was on daily insulin shots. When he turned 30, he got word that he had one kidney that was at 25% and the other not functioning. It was recommended that he not only have a kidney transplant, but a pancreas transplant as well, which would remove the diabetes from his life. He was also at the time newly married and going through college. And while the transplant was successful, he had a year-long battle with varying pneumonia issues and fungus on the liver. It delayed his schooling and ultimately a separation and a divorce. A few years later, was the divorce, he said. He was going through varying levels of hardship because he was in and out of the hospital, emotional trauma regarding his marriage. The week leading up to his death, I received a phone call from him. I'll never forget it. It was a Tuesday night. He called to inform me that his roommate was kicking him out of the house and he would have to move home. We chatted for a bit, actually laughed for a bit, and abruptly he said, I got to go. My roommate just got home. Maybe I should go buy $20 worth of quarters and go to a payphone and give you a call. We chuckled and hung up. That following Saturday evening, my wife called out to me as I was arriving home that Tim's brother was on the phone. He informed me that Tim had passed away. I immediately drove over to Tim's parents' house, and it was a scene of a normal passing of life. But I had the sense something was amiss. In later years, I met with his siblings to discuss my sense, and they confirmed that he had committed suicide. If Tim had only gone and purchased those extra quarters and told me what was going on, if only I had 1 hour prior to him making his ultimate decision, things would be different. My heart aches for Rondale's family. I'll be praying for him in these days. And it's a subject we do talk about from time to time. It's not a very pleasant subject, obviously, to discuss. But it's worthy, I think, of some time because I don't know that we'll ever know what triggers that end or that decision. It's different reasons, right, for different people, realistically. And I don't know what we might find out about Moore, what was going on in his mind. If he was discouraged about that or might have been discouraged about something else. There might have been other, challenges that he had in terms of mental health where he just couldn't stay on an even keel. Who knows what the thing is. But as horrific as these stories are, they are kind of a reminder, right? That whether you're famous or not, stuff gets to people. They go to places that maybe even surprise themselves, and you can tell them logically they shouldn't. You should tell them you can tell them logically, well, here's what you have, this, and this. This is not even something you should be considering. But in the end, it doesn't matter whether it's logical or not. And to the point of the text or the email writer to me, to me the moral I got from him, and I always get when people talk about these stories or their own experiences with it, is if a person sadly is intent on taking that last step, there may be nothing that you can do about it. That's the tragic truth of it. But that doesn't mean you don't continue to do everything in your human power to make sure if there's a chance that person can be turned back, that you might be able to be a small part of that turn, right? By making that call, by reaching out. And a lot of times these folks do not want to be reached out to. Mm-hmm. They can even, I'm sure, in some occasions be difficult to deal with and intimidating and almost berate you for wanting to do it. But what do you hear all the time from the professionals? That shouldn't stop you. If you can find a way, because to me, we know there are occasions where one other conversation, for whatever reason, kicks in and has some impact, and the person looks back on it because they didn't end up taking that step, and they go, that's what kind of opened the door. I don't know why. I don't know why that person saying that to me at that point compared to 5 other people saying the same thing. Something kicked in. So to me, that's the moral of the story, is you can't give up on anybody. You just can't do it, even if the person doesn't seem all that inviting to you about attempting to play that particular role, correct?
I would also add, though, you do have to let yourself off the hook if it doesn't go the right way, because I think a lot of people carry that. I mean, I even think about it, what would you say the percentage is of someone that has a story like that got emailed in just from people listening right now? It's probably much higher than you think, right?
Correct. Absolutely.
And maybe not best friends like that person, but friends, someone in a friend group, a coworker, whatever, that they're carrying that same thought and perhaps guilt around 20 some years later, like the emailer was. Because the other part that we always hear is, you might think, man, if I could have said something, but like you said, it's often not received. They're not in a spot to receive. It doesn't make sense to us, but it probably doesn't make sense to them either, and that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
Their brain isn't functioning and thinking that way. So it's a lot. There's a lot to think about in situations like this.
You're 100% right. There's that you cannot hold yourself responsible, because ultimately that person is either going to try to listen to the folks around them and even to their own head, hoping to get to a better place, or they're not. And so there are probably a lot of people who punish themselves about, well, I should have made one more phone call.
Right. Or I shouldn't have said this to them at this point. Was that something that I did?
You cannot, I agree, drive yourself crazy with that as well, because you're dealing with such a volatile situation in which there are no easy answers. It was interesting, though. I don't have the quote in front of me, but O'Connell's reaction fascinated me, because what he seemed to be saying, if I read it right, was obviously he was devastated. But beyond that, he held on to a feeling that in situations where players are dealing with injury, whatever, like that, cataclysmic injury, his desire and his wish, because of his belief that he can have some positive impact on what that player is dealing with going through that very frustrating process, is that they're around here. That's part of what he said, that, the decision was made that he was going to train and get himself back someplace else, which he did. And the sense I got from, speaking of like haunting yourself, that I got from O'Connell was sort of like, he's always going to wonder. And I don't think he was trying to be presumptuous here. I don't think he was trying to say, well, I could have fixed everything. But I think it's a belief that if you think you're a coach who does pay attention to that aspect of somebody, of his players, that you're saying, if we have in this environment, and I can, where we feel like we've got some good ways to deal with frustrations, whatever, you feel more in, if maybe not in control of it, but a better chance to maybe encourage a better outcome. And again, this might not have anything to do with his rehab process,
right? With
the number of injuries, because he's had a series of injuries. This could be something completely different. We don't know. I don't think we've had anybody attempt to try to figure that out yet. I don't know if anybody from the family is going to, obviously, generally people want privacy, certainly early at a time like this. But we do know, again, as much progress as we've made on I think, making mental health something we can talk about out loud in ways that we didn't. I think we're way better on that than we used to be. But I think part of the challenge is to continue to draw that out, and so that people don't have to feel embarrassed, or that they're going to be mocked or they're going to be ridiculed. When you're talking about this sort of decision, because this is obviously the ultimate decision. It's 25 years old. 25 years old.
Here's the Star Tribune story from a couple of days ago from Indy. O'Connell said Moore rehabilitated the injury off-site, that the Vikings felt they couldn't, quote, have the same level of impact that we pride ourselves on with our players within our building and the resources we do have. It feels in many ways from my chair of how I like to make sure I'm making it about the player, for the player, with the player, and with their best interest in mind. It feels like kind of one that got away in many ways for me. It's been tough to kind of work through that.
On stuff, quarterback related stuff, I've been pretty critical about, his place in some of the decision making. And I give him grief about some of the word salad and sometimes I think giving us a different face publicly than there might be privately when it comes to dealing with the media. But I think he's 100% earnest with that.
Oh, for sure.
And I appreciate it. I think he means every word of that. I don't think he's trying to say, well, I could have fixed everything. But I think that part of it makes sense. And that's part of the tragedy of this is the what ifs. Well, what if this had been done instead of that? Could that have made a difference? And you never know. Because, again, if somebody, based on the stuff I've ever read, if somebody is intent on this, in the end, that's only going to change if they can get to themselves, hopefully with help from others who might, we hope, are going to be trained in how to deal with individuals who are feeling this way and taking the best approach and strategies to try to get them to some other place. But we do know, because we've had people, when we've talked about this before, say, I was there, and then this happened. Something turned it for me. And now I look back on it and I say, oh my God, how close I came to making that particular decision. So I really feel like that's why, you're right. You can't beat yourself up if you got too busy to make one more phone call, or you made the call and it didn't go well and you said, hey, I'm backing off. On the other hand, I think if it's somebody that you can reach out for, and you can almost accept, even if the person's not going to receive it very well, it's worth making the try, because it's such a total loss. And I know nothing about the background, if there is any background, regarding Martin Short's daughter, who, as I said, I think was 42 years old. But again, these are famous people, but we know this stuff happens every day to people who are not as famous. Let's get a pause in here. And we'll get to a couple of A-section items. We'll have Russo at the top of the hour. First chance we will have had to chat with him since the gold medal run by the U.S. on both the men's side and the women's side, which he covered a bunch of the women's stuff as well. So we'll get to all of that with him at the top of the hour, and we'll open Dr. Dan's inbox at 5:30. Open up the text line. I waited, I think, very strategically to a place where I think it made some sense.
I saw you look at me. I'm like,
is he cheating?
He's opening the text line, because I think I was supposed to stop you.
You were, but I think it's all about timing. And given this subject, this is the time where we usually get, I think, some of the most interesting and provocative texts and honest texts from people. And that has, once again, been very much the case. Tough. This is from, looks like Cecil in Maple Grove. Tough topic to discuss. Happy to hear you addressing it. Recovery for me is the same in that the individual must make the decision for themselves. 612 guy writes, again, tough issue to discuss. I would just like to add that a lot of people think I could never get to the point of wanting to take my life. Why would someone do that? Well, I got to say, as someone who is at the highest level of my profession, been known as a tough-minded individual, anyone can get to a really bad point. And those thoughts creep into your mind out of nowhere. Crazy to think. If people are stressed, they need to talk to someone. That's exactly what I was looking for from people. Because I do think there's that sense of, well, guy's got everything. Everything's great. Top of the line profession. That doesn't necessarily mean a thing at any given moment. Dan, while we are better, in general, society still views mental illness as a character flaw, not as a disease. Until we can overcome that, we are going to continue to struggle. There's probably some truth to that, too. This is from Fabian in Brainerd. Thank you for discussing this. My middle son had a tight group of 5 close friends, solid, great guys. His freshman year of high school, my son's classmate and best friend took his own life. It was abysmal. We all intensively dealt with it with the friend group and the entire school system, and that wasn't enough because 3 months later, a second of those 5 boys committed suicide. Our community was ripped from its insides, and those of us parents had to consider some sort of pact, that there might have been some sort of suicide pact. Thank the Lord there was not, and those 3 remaining have gone on to be very successful, but they always carry that darkness with them. Hold on, gotta scroll down here. Of course, they will never be the same. That agony is on instant access, but they carry on. Smiles for Jayco Warriors. Sincere thanks for efforts to crush the stigma and get this conversation uncovered. That's Fabian in Brainerd. And there have obviously, we've talked about that. There have been stories about those kinds of things and pacts, right? And even websites that encourage people to do those sorts of things. That's a discussion that we've had from time to time as well. I'm hoping, well, I don't know. I mean, again, you want to respect privacy. But, and it shouldn't be about an age, right? It really shouldn't. But obviously, it's always going to be more jarring when it's a teenager or when it's somebody like Moore was 25 years old, right? I mean, 42 is too young. They're all too young, but it strikes more when you're talking about somebody in their teens or somebody who's, like I said, 25 years old, because it's the cliche seems to apply. You go, man, so many ways this could go for you, you know, in the right direction to reach a point of that level of desperate. But it speaks to there's nothing logical about it.
That's it. That's the hard part.
And that's what, you know, people have to get over that. Oh, come on. What are you doing? That's for folks who are there, clinically speaking, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that, well, you're too young to even think about something like that, right?
And we don't know the specifics about Rondale.
No, we don't.
Obviously yet, but just the theory, right, given how often he's been injured.
Yes.
Is that may have, because I was talking to a trainer the other day.
It was endless with him.
Yes.
It was literally endless.
And I remember saying to the trainer, how much time do you spend with someone who's torn their ACL? Which I think is what he just did, right?
Correct. Yep.
And I was actually shocked. I don't know why. The trainer said 3 to 4 hours every day. 3 to 4 hours every day for like a year, 9 to 12 months. And so I assume that's probably what he was doing, something like that. And you have to do that especially again and again.
If you want to be, like you say, a world-class football player playing the National Football League, you're exactly right.
And I just said, okay, wow, and this wasn't about the Rondale Moore situation. It was just, I was asking about something else, and I was stunned. But then you think about, I remember him being injured when the Gophers played them in 2019. He was on the field and got hurt. He and the quarterback got hurt in the same play in 2019. And I don't remember if that was season ending, but you just think about the collective weight of every single injury. And you're probably wondering, I was supposed to be this football star. I'm supposed to be, this high draft pick and this stud. And when he was healthy, man, he really was. I'm sure it just over and over again, that has to have some kind of collective weight.
Well, the other significant part of the story that probably doesn't get enough attention, and we're getting it from people texting. I just got a couple more texts from people talking about how they've had individuals in their life make that decision. And how many times have you been find out, like, in some obscure way, that someone you know maybe real well or somebody you even just know more casually, 9 years ago, somebody in their brother did it, that they lost somebody in the family. The toll on the individuals left behind who, again, a sibling or a son or a daughter, that's to me another underrated part of the story. How do you cope with that? I assume you never get past it completely, right? I mean, because it's got to be too traumatic. But then you also, there's that balancing act of, well, if I wallow in it every day, what am I gaining by not living my life? But is it all? It's got to, I would assume, always be there. And how do you do that? Do you put it away? Do you kind of put it away? The famous who's the guy that played Bad Santa?
Billy Bob Thornton.
Billy Bob Thornton. A number of years ago, this clip is getting attention suddenly now because everything's coming back in this day and age. And it was him. He lost his brother a long time ago. It was not suicide. I want to say it was a heart attack. But he had a famous interview in which, or I don't even know if it was an interview, where he seemed to be looking into a camera, where he basically said, there is not a day that goes by, no matter how many years go by, that I am not thinking about the loss of my brother. And he basically put it on the basis of, and I don't want there to be a day I'm not thinking about him. That's the price I am willing to pay and want to pay. I don't want to put him away. I always want to think about him every day, as painful as it is. Now, that's not involving suicide, but that, I think I'm kind of interested and eager to find out how individuals who have had that around them, how do you cope? Because again, everybody's got to have coping mechanisms. They have to find ways to get out from it, even if you try to learn some things from it, because you got to live your life. But what's that like? I don't think we probably talk about the survivors enough. The people who are still here, and you want to talk about guilt. They, even more than friends, right? About one more phone call, they're going to have even more of that, one would assume, right? If it's somebody who was in their household, if it was a son or daughter, a cousin, whatever the case may be, somebody that they knew very, very well. So that's part of it.
And they're probably always looking for answers. And like we've talked about, oftentimes they're never going to get those answers. They're never going to get that closure. We always talk about that. Did person leave a note? Did they leave any explanation?
Yeah, right.
And oftentimes no. And even so, if they did, what would that really provide? Would that give you the peace or the closure? Still probably not. So yeah, it can take you to some dark places.
As a veteran, I've lost a few other Marines I served with. I wasn't always close to them as we changed units, but still hard to hear one made that choice. This is speaking of Rondale. His whole life was football. It has to be to get to that level. That identity gets taken away with every injury. Top athletes are pushed so hard, it has to be their whole lives. Also, why we hear so much about athletes who fall apart after retirement. That may well be. I don't want to say we know that because every situation is different. But yeah, that wouldn't be. I mean, and you can say on the outside, it's just, there's other careers. It's just sports. I mean, come on. There's other things you're going to be able to do. And logically, that's true. But depending on where your mind is and what other things you got rattling around in it, who's to say what impact, in some case, that might have a greater impact on some than on others. A couple more quick. I had where did I find it? There was an interesting text about a rural organization that helps to deal with this. Now, of course, I can't. To Be Continued is a great suicide awareness group that specializes in the rural areas. They meet with mostly schools west of the cities in rural Minnesota. To Be Continued. And there's a million, I think, support groups. A lot of times individuals who still take that last step, they know it, and maybe they've even participated in some of that. But perhaps for one reason or another, it didn't resonate or it didn't hold on to things that much. Our brother killed himself 40 years ago. The rest of us siblings still miss him. It's not an everyday wallow, but it's there. And things remind us of him. 40 years ago. So I said, I don't think you can ever, there's no such thing as getting past it. I think especially that would be true if it was your child, right? That's almost impossible. I had a son who passed away at 16 from suicide. He wasn't biologically mine, but raised him as a kid from birth to 8 and always considered him my son. We got back in touch when he was a young teen, July 2nd, 2020. Stopped into my work. We talked about 45 minutes. I didn't know it was the last time we'd speak. Dylan was an amazing young man. Helped grow the Wave Youth Group in Big Lake, straight A student, worked 3 jobs. I've always thought I should have reached out more. Maybe had I been better while with his mom, things could be different. I've been to dark places, even tried. I think once a person gets to a point where, hey, when I'm gone, it won't matter, it gets dangerous. Great topic. Need more of these. That is from a longtime listener, Papa Taco. I appreciate all the earnest texts, and maybe we will revisit some of them when we get into the 5 o'clock hour or into the 6. There will be no top 5 at 5 today. There will be an inbox at 5:30, maybe to try to lighten things up just a little bit, because it's a tough subject, but I think one worthy of conversation. When we come back, we'll check in for the first time since the Winter Olympics ended and started, quite frankly, with Russo Radio. Questions for him? He is next right here in the Fan.